Malo Lele, and welcome everyone to another episode of the Polynesian Eyes podcast. We have a live digital kava session here. Like to welcome Mr. Ate Aroa and Maka from Salt Lake. How's it going, guys?
Yeah, good, Malo.
Doing very well, Tua. Always good to be here.
Yeah,
yeah, we're excited. We're excited to have Maka join us, a regular here on the show. We appreciate his time. He is a busy dad nowadays. Exciting times. New addition to the family.
Yes, sir.
Nice.
So yeah, that must be pretty exciting on your neck of the woods then, Maka, huh?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, trying to get used to the adjusted sleep, you know.
Oh snap. No, 100%. Like it's crazy. It's like when a little kid sleeps in the bed yet takes up the most amount of space. The littlest thing now takes the most amount of time in the family. But like you said, it's all good things. Sweet. Well, we'll jump right into it because I think we're going to cover a lot of ground, a lot of different areas, depending on how comments come online and how the discussion goes. I was mentioning to Masi and Maka, this might go a little political, might go a little historical. We may go a little
all around
current events. It's going to be all over the place, but I think it's a really important topic because it's a lot that's going on, not only in our historical conversations on the Tui Tonga, the Tui Manua, and then just the Polynesian Empire, but also a lot on current events and what people are talking about. And it really is, what's the role of government, right? What's government's role in our lives? You can't get away from it, right? It's not like, well, I guess you could go live up in the woods in the middle of nowhere, but at some point, off the grid. But at some point, you're gonna have to engage with government. That's just the nature of it. And going to the extent that let's maybe do this. Let's start off with a reaction to a video of how crazy it is, right? Like this is going all over the place where you are having athletes, you are having, movie stars, everyone's talking about what's the role of government. You even got our good buddy here, Conor McGregor, is stepping to the plate, and he's talking about government because everyone just has something to say and some impact in their lives. So let's start with this video and then open it up for a discussion.
To have with us on St. Patrick's Day. We're both wearing our green. This was not planned, but very festive. And as you know, I'll be having a briefing later at 1:00. So we'll talk more about their meeting later. But he's going over to meet with some other administration officials. He's spending the day in Washington, D.C.
For sure.
So
I'm here to raise the issues the people of Ireland face. And it'll be music to the people of Ireland's ears, because never on the main stage has the issues the people of Ireland face been spoke. Our government has long since abandoned the voices of the people of Ireland. And it's high time that America is made aware of what is going on in Ireland. What is going on in Ireland is a travesty. Our government is the government of zero action with zero accountability. Our money is being spent on overseas issues that has nothing to do with the Irish people. The illegal immigration racket is running ravage on the country. There are rural towns in Ireland that have been overrun in one swoop, that have become a minority in one swoop. So issues need to be addressed. And the 40 million Irish Americans, as I said, need to hear this, because if not, there will be no place to come home and visit. Ireland is at the cusp of, potentially losing its Irishness. And I'm here to raise the issue and highlight it. It's also St. Patrick's Day, so a little bit of celebrations for sure. And, a little bit of learning and listening to Mr. President Trump, whose work ethic is inspiring. And all that does to me is highlight the lack of work on my side. So that's it. That's what I'm here for.
Awesome. Thank you, Conor.
Any thoughts? Any thoughts, guys?
Go ahead, Maka. I know Masi ready to say something, man.
Nah, because I was just thinking, man, like when he says like losing its Irishness, I'm always thinking, and you know how he says he mentions the importance of the Irish Americans who live in America and the importance for them to come home. That's almost the same situations in Tonga, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's many Tongans in Australia, America, even here in New Zealand and different parts of the world the reason why they come to Tonga is almost like because Tonga is Tonga, right? If
Yep.
Tonga had some massive changes with immigration, right? It's and the government, let's just say, allows it to happen, and let's just say somebody in Tonga didn't sound the alarm to other Tongans. They're like, hey, you guys maybe need to pay attention to what's going on in Tonga if you still want to see Tonga still be called, like your home away from home kind of thing.
Mhm.
So looks like he's sounding that alarm with Ireland because Ireland is a different, unique culture compared to the English and the other parts of Europe. So Conor McGregor, as a proud Irishman, just sounding the alarm. It seems to me it's not just an Ireland problem. It seems to be a whole UK, Europe problem with this mass migration, and and I think what they're saying is there's no vetting process to at least get like skills to really help your economy kind of thing. But it's like a mass open gate because I'm for immigration and migration and stuff, but it's different, right? When you live in America and Australia and New Zealand, you're a little bit tolerant. But let's just say if Tonga was to do something like Tonga can use a lot of labor force. They can get more Indians, get more Chinese, and let the floodgates open because they can say in the name of the economics to build a country, they'll do that. But then you'll lose something else. And I think that will hit different to all Tongans, no matter how many generations you are growing up in America or other parts of the world. It will hit different. Then you pay attention. But just this is just a good. I think like what you said, good. A learning time, even though it was St. Patrick's Day. It's a good learning time for the Irish, also for all, especially ethnic people from their homeland. It's to always keep an ear to make sure everything in Tonga is running properly, and maybe do something to help back in Tonga to keep Tonga what you remember when you were a kid or when you visited Tonga. So that's just me. That was my instant thoughts on that thing.
What's your thoughts, Maka?
No, good thoughts. No, I was just thinking when the whole time he was talking, I was just like, man, I know for any Irish person seeing that, they're gonna tune in. But I know for like the average American, they're probably gonna, if it wasn't for Conor McGregor, they probably wouldn't really care. You know what I mean? Because they probably might not know what's going on in Ireland. They might not care. I'm sure for the avid person that's into politics, but for like the average person who kind of would just, it'll pop on their feed. They might tune in or whatever. Like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't know what was really going on with Ireland, whatever. Not really paying attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People like me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not into politics as much as I need to be. You know what I'm saying? I know I've said that numerous times, but the fact that it was Conor McGregor, I know people's gonna just stay there and just watch anyway, just because, you know what I mean? All the time he's put in the UFC and all that kind of stuff. But I was just gonna ask, since you guys know, you guys might know a little more. When he's referring to Ireland, he's talking about, because isn't it two separate? There's like Ireland, Northern Ireland. It's like two separate
country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when he's saying Ireland, he's talking about
the Republic.
Because there's one part that's part of the UK, right?
Northern Ireland is part of
Northern
the UK.
Ireland. Okay.
Yeah.
So when he's talking about Ireland, he's not talking about that part, right? Because that's part of the okay. That's
I mean, they claim that should belong to them, right? Like, what is it? The Orange men that are up north, the Protestants, and then the Irish are more Catholic. Yeah. So there used to be like some issues there, some real tension, right? Like actually shooting and killing each other back in the
Civil
day.
War type stuff.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, he's for all intents and purposes the independent nation of Ireland is what he's kind of referring to.
Okay.
Because the UK, which is part of Northern Ireland, they did the Brexit, right? Like they left the European Union. And so they're somewhat already a little bit separated from it, but Ireland is still part of the EU, and the EU right now is, especially led by the Germans, was open door policy. Whoever and whatever comes in,
Well, what's your thoughts, Tua?
Yeah, I'm gonna touch on a couple of these comments before we get too far. So we have Brown Monk says, "Yo,
hey,
Malo,
Brown Monk, what
welcome,
up?
welcome. T-Style is back. Let's go, Malo, gentlemen.
What's up?
T-Style says he's following right now, so perfect timing for the live digital kava session. Yes. T-Style says, "Brah, Connor on politics. That's like us asking David Tua for his thoughts on Uncle Elon's spaceships landing." Hey, no, but that's what we're saying though, is like people are starting to get those questions, right? Like it's getting to the point, like you're saying, is everyone is having something to add to the table, because I think a big part of it is people are sitting back and watching what Donald Trump and Uncle Elon and these guys are doing.
Yeah.
And they're saying, dude, what we should be doing, what's going on over here, right? Like I just saw like the conservative leader of the UK. He's like, I'm sitting here observing Donald Trump and the Americans, and he's saying, you know what? We have been too laid back. We have been sitting back. We need to make England great again, right? Great Britain great again. We need to crack down on illegal immigration. We need to do all these things to take care of our people, right? And this comes back to kind of like our overall theme for today. What is the purpose of the government, right? And when we say government, I think so everyone understands, yes, we're talking about the federal government, state government in that sense, but we're also talking about the church, right? Whatever church you go to, what's the role and function of the church? Because really a government is just anything that's kind of formalized that you delegate certain powers to, because that's what a government is. What a government is as citizens or participants of that organization, we give it certain powers.
Yeah.
Right? Like the federal government.
Representation. It's sort of power to represent you, that they're acting on your behalf.
Exactly. Kind of. And that you're willing to submit or concede certain decisions or power to, right? Just like whatever church you go to, you concede that there are certain decisions the church will make that you are choosing to subject yourself to. No different than a kalapu. A kalapu is a form of government, right? Like to come and be a member of the kalapu, what is it? Is it financial contribution? Is it personal behavior? Is it attire? You know, there are certain things that you concede, right, as part of a team.
And they got a president.
Exactly.
President, you know?
You have a president, you have a secretary, you may have a contribution of funds to execute things. So I want to make sure that, you know, as everyone's listening and adding your comments, we're really talking on the role of government in a very broad sense. We're going to go in between, you know, formal governments as countries. We're going to talk maybe around religion and churches. What's the role of the church, even the family, right? We were just talking before we jumped online. Husband and wife, two-party system, two different interests, right? The husband's interests and the wife's interests. You have to navigate those two, right? And work towards a common goal. And what are the children, the population, you know, because the decisions mom and dad make have an impact on the children. And just like families, independent marriages, their decisions on foreign and domestic policy have impact on siblings, families who act as like other countries, right? Where if you're like if you want to be like Donald Trump in your family, you're gonna tariff everything your siblings do. Maybe your siblings are gonna ita and retaliate with their own tariffs, you know, and those reactions. But it's really just looking at government and organizations in our lives and what's the purpose of it. And I think we're getting to a point that government and organizations are just, it's creeping into every aspect of our lives. Even businesses are turning into quote unquote mini governments. There are certain companies that are larger than whole countries. Yeah. Right. So that's kind of the theme here. Let's see.
Got some comments coming?
Yes. I don't want to get too far from it, but Prince, welcome. He says, Malok Altama about to take a shot of feel free and let's go get it to it. Yes, sir. Hey, man. Yeah.
Nice.
Everybody's feeling mafana today. Everyone's feeling mafana today. Here's T Style says dualism versus modern take on functionalism. Man, that's a little too sophisticated for me, T Style.
Break it down.
Maybe
Break it down.
break it down. Give a little bit more of a breakdown on that. But that's maybe that's a PhD. I'm more like a class one level for me.
Man,
Here's T Style Federal Reserve. Any thoughts on the Federal Reserve? That's a big topic now. Like Uncle Donald, it sounds like he's even considered abolishing.
Dismantling that too.
The Federal Reserve, because it's not managed by the federal government, right? Like it's an independent organization, but it dictates what our interest rates are. So it's kind of an interesting thing is how, this is where all the conspiracies come from, right? Like, or is this was it Rothschild family? Are they the ones really running the world because they have all this wealth and so forth? But T-Style wants to see if we have any thoughts on the Federal Reserve.
Man.
For me too, I'm not too sure with is the Federal Reserves the ones that are in charge of the interest rates that you can do your mortgages and stuff from your homes and how much you can borrow on that kind of thing? Is that what they're in charge of?
Yes. So basically the banks borrow from the Federal Reserve, right?
Okay.
And the Federal Reserve will basically, a lot of times they will set the interest rates, and then the banks that you live in will base their interest rates off of that. So it's a very powerful, it's basically dictating the financial position that the banks in the US will take.
Okay. Yeah. For me, I don't know too much, to be honest, regarding T-Style's question. I don't know too much of the pros and cons, so I guess I'll just leave it to either Maka or you, Tua, to kind of break it down. But I'm not too familiar with the Federal Reserves, if it's a pro or con.
Any thoughts, Maka?
Hey, I'm about to be the student today. I'm over here just like, man, because I know Tua got the.
Oh, I don't know about that.
My problem was, like I said, I don't know if you remember, like, I don't expect you guys to remember, but if you can, in other episodes I've been in, the reason why I didn't really get into politics as far as like touching on everything, including the Federal Reserve, you know what I mean? A lot of that stuff, because remember, I coming in over from Tonga, I came in on a visa as a baby with my parents. I was in overstay, and then I didn't get my green card for like maybe 11 years ago or something like that, 12 years ago, just barely, you know what I mean? So because I grew up my whole life, especially in LA, I just watched the episode about Tua talking about California is like the last place he'd ever go to, you know what I mean? But
I'm not me, I enough.
But me, I wasn't aware of politics and stuff like that growing up in Cali because I was, what you would call an illegal immigrant, kind of, you know what I mean, in a sense, even though I was an overstay. But because I knew I couldn't vote, I knew that if I were going to college or something, I'd have to pay extra fee. Like, I didn't want nothing to do with it. So I never even looked into it. But now that I'm older, like I mentioned earlier, I should learn about this kind of stuff because it's going to affect, especially having a newborn. It's going to affect me, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm probably kind of a little more like Mussy. Like, I do know that the Federal Reserve does have something to do with like the president right now, technically himself directly doesn't have anything to do with interest rates and all that kind of stuff, which the Federal Reserve does, right? Tua might be able to school us on that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't consider myself like a pro or anything on the Federal Reserve. It's just what a lot of people don't like about it is that there's no oversight by anyone who's voted on. Like even the president of the United States doesn't have control on what the Federal Reserve does. Doesn't that seem just odd?
That's crazy,
right? Like so it just seems odd, and they're run by a bunch of private guys, right? And there's just a lot of weird stuff going on. Basically, for me, ever since the U.S. kind of went off of gold standard, using gold as you back your currency with gold, they just started printing money. It just felt like it gave a lot of power to a small handful of people, and whenever you do that, I'm not a big fan of it, right? Just the same thing like the federal government. I think the federal government has like a handful of responsibilities: foreign affairs, keeping the border, having a military, maybe having some federal roads. But once you achieve that, I'm pretty happy with a federal government. But now it gets into a bunch of other stuff. I don't like that, right? Like, just let's use the Department of Education. Masi's mentioning Donald Trump's about to dismantle that, right?
I think he did. He already signed the executive order.
So before the Department of Education, America was doing great, leading the world in education, right? Then all of a sudden, the federal government decides we need a federal, because it used to be taken care of by the states. We need a federal organization to regulate it. Not only have we spent trillions of dollars, we've gotten worse with the trillions of dollars, right? I mean, it's just like the war on poverty. America creates that. So we're going to have a war on poverty. We spend trillions and trillions of dollars, and the gap between the rich and the poor get wider, right? And there comes a point where you're like, wait a second. Why is it every time we say we're going to have the federal government solve a problem and throw a lot of money at it, the problem gets worse? And you can do that on almost every agency. Federal Reserve is the same thing. Federal Reserve regulates, sets it up for all the interest rates for all the banks. You know what's happening? Small community banks are dying left and right. Many of the decisions that the Federal Reserve does, many times it causes for smaller banks to die and bigger banks to buy them up. Right? So I'm just, let me put it this way. I'm not an expert, but I'm always like, I'm always cautious. Like, what's your real reason? Right? Okay. Like, why are you trying to make things more on the federal level? And it's because you try to consolidate more power.
When was the Federal Reserve created?
That's a good question, Masi.
Because I'm thinking you're saying, Tua, when the Federal Reserve was created, we came off the gold standard of having gold to back our money, and it was just more on just interest rates, and just maybe we started to print a lot more money that was, that really kind of caused inflation, right? So that's what I'm thinking.
Been around for a while, I think.
Yeah, it's been around for a while. I don't know.
World War II or something like that, or
shortly after. Let's do this. Let's share this tab, and we have our good and AI, the newest and greatest grok.
Malo grok.
So the history: the Federal Reserve was established on December 23rd, 1913. So before World War I and II, when President Woodrow Wilson, and you guys know who Woodrow Wilson is, right? That's the guy who
he was a super like lefty, right?
Super lefty. He's the one who basically elevated the KKK to a more influential position. Okay, so he's. I mean, granted, people on the left will probably be like, "Tua, you're just picking." I'm a little biased. I'm much more of a conservative. Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act into law. Its creation was in response to a series of financial panics, particularly the Panic of 1907, which exposed the vulnerabilities of the U.S. banking system. Before the Fed, the U.S. lacked a centralized mechanism to manage currency and stabilize the economy. Early attempts at central banking, like the first and second banks of the United States, had failed due to political opposition and concerns over centralized power. Once again, right? Federal government is a necessary evil from my perspective, right? You have to have government, but it is a very dangerous thing to have. Any thoughts, or you want me to jump into?
No, I think I kind of get it now. So there were a lot. Is it because of, like, I don't know, the Great Depression or something that happened before, and there was coming back out of that just the instability, and they just thought it was much better to have certain people with a lot of money to watch the.
Yeah, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Obviously, experts, right? We've learned a lot about experts, in my opinion, in COVID, right? Like we need to put the experts in charge. But obviously, there was even opposition to that, right? The Federal Reserve. So basically, the purpose, monetary policy, it's supposed to facilitate financial stability and be the main payment system for the government. And obviously,
stability.
Doge has looked into some of those things and some of the payments that goes on, trillions of dollars to unknown locations. Let's get through some of the comments. They're starting to get away from me. Any thoughts before I get to the comments?
Nope, no thoughts.
Learned something new today.
Yeah.
So let me get this view here. So T-Style says Federal Reserve is an agent of the World Bank contracted with the USA, but has a tight grip around our neck. I wouldn't be surprised if that's has some truth to it. Paulie Prince, this is more towards you. Maka says, rest in peace.
Hey.
Got a blue.
It's a little bro right there. Malo.
She, as always, Wada Bears, never boring. Alphabet Mafia is going to lose the month of June.
Os kona Wada Bears.
She Wada Bears. Hey, Mo just clocked in. Welcome, Mo. He says, what's up, Tonga kids?
What up, Mo?
Oh, yeah. Mo says it's getting even worse now. Hurry up, Trump, and stop taxing me on my overtime.
Man.
No tips. On tips and overtime, no tax.
Trump needs to work on that. Is he still trying to work on those things? Because I know that's one of his stuff that he was working on.
He didn't sign off on it yet?
No, they're working through a they got it because they have a bunch on the because on the tax it needs the Congress to sign off on it. Okay. So he's working through those, and he's going to have to do it. I mean, hopefully within the next 2 years, because you don't know if you're still going to have the House and the Senate after the midterms. Because if he loses the House or the Senate, then he won't be able to.
Stalemate.
Yeah, he won't be able to pull it off. But yeah, I mean, just kind of on your comments earlier, Maka. I think we were all like that, right? Like it's kind of like as you're going through life, politics is like, it's not important. I'm too busy being the cool guy on campus, hanging out, enjoying life, which I think is a natural progression. But that's why I wanted to define government as a very broad term in our discussion, because you know what, when you look at the root word of politics or polity, it means it's no different than social. It's interacting with people. That's what I'm saying is you can't avoid it. Yeah. Right? It's impossible. You can't say, like let's use an example. You can't say I don't care about politics or politics doesn't impact me when politics decides how you're taxed. Politics decides what your children get taught in school, right? Politics determines what kind of laws happen, right? So I think it's that as we mature and we get older, we start to realize, we can't just ignore politics, right? It's a really important part of our lives, and it's funny how Masi, you were talking earlier about Tonga. Some of the videos towards the end, we're going to talk about how some people are reacting. They had like some kind of summit going on in Tonga where they brought in the people to kind of give feedback and talk back to the government. Some interesting comments back, but
you know what's funny? Just a thought popped up growing up in LA. So like, what's funny is, I wouldn't what you would call like a certified gangbanger or anything, right? But as far at least I can't speak on other states or other cities or whatever, or even other parts of California, but the word politic is they use that term, and I'm not proclaiming to be a gang expert or nothing, right? but they call it politicking. You know, they politic with each other like the Bloods and Crips.
Yeah.
There's certain politics you got to follow. There's there's times there's certain times of ceasefires or called peace treaties and all kind of stuff, which is just funny because it's kind of like they're like anti-government, but at the same time they got the government, you know, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But I feel like you said there's government in every aspect, no matter on the street level, all the way up to the, you know what I mean? So
because those gangs are a form of government.
Yeah,
right. Like the gang is a form of government. It has its rituals of, and whether you call it government or religion, it has certain rituals, right? That's why I think if maybe I just sound crazy, but everything to me looks religious. Everything to me looks political. Everything looks like a family. Like these are all overlapping ideas. They're the same ideas presented in different ways. Like let's use the gang situation, right? Yeah. The gang situation has an initiation, typically, right? You have to show commitment. And how do you show that commitment? Either by doing a task, right? Or showing it over a period of time. And if you show that, then you're brought in, right? And when you're brought in, there's an expectation. You know, you don't just be brought in and then you fight Terija. No, you're brought in. There's certain rules. There's certain politicking, right? And when we say it's a ceasefire, you can't just go on and decide on your own, right? No, you have to consult with the rest of the government, the rest of the family.
Just like the government, there's consequences.
Exactly, right? Exactly, 100%. So really, I mean, it's the same thing with the family, right? You can go and do whatever you want, but there's consequences when you come home and dad has the 2x4 with you, right? And so this is kind of a that's why I think it's a very important way for us to have this conversation, because it's about how you should interact and how you should view government organizations and your role in it, and to realize you can't escape it, right? It's like saying, it's like when I talk to an atheist and they say, I don't live by faith. I only live by facts. And I'm like, Sharna, it's impossible to escape living by faith. You don't know if you're going to get in the car, if you're going to die in the car, right? When you say you saw these facts, you have faith that the scientist who's telling you is not lying to you, right? Like by the simple fact that we don't have access to all the information, we live by faith. That's just the reality. And that's what I want to kind of really express to everyone as we're talking about this is you cannot escape politics. You cannot escape government. These are things that are a real big part of our lives. Let me see here. Water Bears says, I never gave a crap about the Obama era because I was young, dumb, and broke at the time. Now married with kids, paying taxes, and determining what my children get taught. 100%. Right? And I, 100%. And that's just normal, right? That's what we call progression in life. That just happens, right? I didn't care about a lot of those things like Water Bears is saying until all of a sudden, when you look at your paycheck and then you're like, Shanna, I worked X amount of hours. When you do the simple math, right? When you do the simple math, a certain rate for a certain amount of time equals a certain amount of dollars. And then when the check comes, it's way smaller. Yeah. So naturally you're like, oh yeah, well, money.
The Federal Reserve. Hey.
Exactly. The federal taxes that are coming out. That's why I'm in Texas. A big reason of why I'm in Texas, no income state tax.
Yeah.
Right. One of the reasons why, I was open to going to Las Vegas, because why? No income state. Exactly. Utah. I tried to move to Utah. I tried to make it work. I was like, house more expensive, income tax, I get paid less. And then I kept trying to look at it. Interest rates went up because of the Federal Reserve. This was like what, maybe a year ago, year and a half ago.
Yeah, you were thinking about it.
I thought I pulled the trigger. I'm going to move to Utah. Right? Hey, we're going to do it. Interest rates. Federal Reserve kept raising the interest rates. Right. Cost of living. I was like, oh, yeah, wait. Enough for pay Texas. That's all we got.
Yeah. Everybody's waiting on that OT bill, man.
Yes, everybody's waiting for the tax on the OT.
Yeah.
let me see here. Any other thoughts, and we'll go to maybe another thing.
I have a couple thoughts. Well, I have my first. I'm interested with what Maka's thoughts are on this, like with the whole immigration stuff, because I know, he was you just shared Maka, right? You overstayed, and then you were able to get
Oh yeah,
your green card and everything.
Hey,
And
everything immigration I had to deal with growing up. Like my siblings, they all born out here. They don't know
They were
about
fine.
having to go to downtown.
They don't have to deal with that.
Standing in line around the block, taking 5 hours to get in the building for them to deny you. You know what I'm saying? They don't know about that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, go ahead,
Maka, yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I'm always I always taking the thoughts of like, hey, if you're overstay, hey, I'm fine with that. I'm not one of those people that call or whatever. Apparently, there's been things that have been happening. People call whoever's to overstay them, know, right? Get them out. I'm not. I'm not. I don't subscribe to that thing. But I'm like, hey, if you're here, you're already here. But if you get caught, this is my thing.
Yeah.
If you get caught, then that's your own doing. You gotta just face the consequences on that. But that's just me on how I feel on that. I just think, what's your thoughts with the whole, we saw the 250 plus criminals, and of course when you try to focus on like people who are doing some hardcore crime, there's gonna be some collateral damage, because obviously they've been here for a while, they're gonna have kids, all of that kind of stuff. The whole trickles down. And I just wanted to see what your thoughts are. If is what's going on, is it too extreme, or do you think, this is the law of the land, it's the president, this is how it goes? But I'm just saying, like, for me, I'm just saying, hey, go do your thing. If you get caught, hey, you get caught. No, nothing personal. You face the consequences just like everybody else. Whatever they do with their choices, they face the consequences. It is what it is. That's just what I subscribe to. I just want to hear your thoughts, just with, you've kind of lived it with being overstayed. Now that you have your green card and everything, just kind of where the world is at right now. What's your thoughts on that?
Man, I mean, I need to do my citizenship. That's the first thing. But I mean, as far, because for example, I got a lot of I don't want to say a lot, but I have some acquaintances, people I'm acquainted with, friends and stuff that have been deported. You know what I mean? And I just, for some random reason, I was thinking about this the other day, like, sometimes there's random stuff that'll just pop up and it'll pique an interest, and I'll watch the whole thing. But I'm watching these people getting locked up in prison for, there's something to do with, like, it was like the different degrees in murder, for example, right? Like 3rd degree, 1st degree, 3rd degree, 2nd degree, 1st degree, the severity, 3rd degree or 1st degree being the most severe, and like the possibility of getting like life without parole, all that kind of stuff, versus you getting deported. I'm like, man. And this is probably just a random thought, maybe nothing to do with what you're asking, but like, I was like thinking, man, I'd rather get deported than get locked up for life without parole in prison, because
100%.
move out to Tonga and come live with me, we could be together. But whereas in prison, you just around a bunch of nothing but dudes, you're never gonna get out, and it's like, it's crazy. But I mean, I think the old saying is true. I mean, again, not to bring gangbanging in, but it's kind of like, you do the crime, you know what you sign up for, you do the crime, and because I mean, like, for who in their right mind would think in any modern government that, like, you should expect consequences. You should expect consequences of what you do. You know what I mean? So you got to deal with all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? But like, as far as like, again, I'm not really knowing too familiar. I'm still kind of, like I said, I'm starting to kind of learn and look into immigration type stuff. But with what Trump, because like, what is Trump trying to do? He's trying to crack down on it, right? He's trying to crack be down. More severe as far as people doing crimes and stuff. You talking about he's trying to send people back to their countries?
Deporting people back that have no status here,
even if their kids were born here, right? Something like that, right? Or
is it something like that too? Right? It's with their whole family, right?
Yes. If you came illegally, he says you are subject to it. Now, that's not his main focus right now. His main focus is criminals, right? Like that's where they're focusing right now. But what they have said is, but if you're here illegally and we come across you, you're subject to being removed. But their primary focus right now is MS-13, Tren de Agua. Those are the top two that they've and then also the cartels that they're starting to name as terrorist organizations, because that triggers more severity in their actions. But yeah, I mean, they're primarily focusing on the criminals, but they are saying, hey, if you're here illegally, you should be concerned, is what they're saying.
Okay, my bad. Not to drag it on a little longer, but I just remembered I just watched something on. It was on YouTube, but it was some series. I think I forgot the name of the channel, but it talked about. I don't know if it's the 13th or 14th Amendment, something to do, and it showed a whole bunch of cases of like it. So I think it's called like Jus Soleil or Just Soleil or something like that. You know that law where I don't know if you want to pull it up, but it's like whoever's born in the U.S. with
birthright citizenship.
And I know there's been some that's been a topic of debate amongst Americans, like who's a citizen, who should be a citizen, citizen, all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So to go with what you're asking, I know it in that little mini documentary I watched, it went through from like it had something to do with the slaves. Then it was like, oh, what about the Chinese people? Or what about, the other people, all that kind of stuff. Like who is their children? Will their children count? Because there was a whole bunch of stuff to do with it. It was pretty good. I don't know if I could just pull it up right now, but I mean, as far as that goes, tying into what you're talking about, trying to target the criminals, right? Do you think it as possible to do as far as like to separate like the illegal criminals from just illegals who are doing what they're supposed to do? Like you think that would be possible to regulate all that kind of stuff, or would that just be too much work? Or what y'all think? Like as far as like immigration goes, that's to me that's where the question comes down to, because it's kind of like I don't know if you should generalize it, like just get all immigrants out of here versus I can see like the criminals, like I mean who wants a criminal? Who would want a criminal in their neighborhood or country or city, right? You know what I'm saying? But if you're going to just lump them all in one category, just all illegal immigrants, that I think that's where the question comes down to. Like, is that
100%.
Is that able to be regulated as far as because like how many immigrants are there in the country?
Well, see, this is the funny thing, and I want to say funny, but this is how governments work, right? You know what determines this? Who the people vote for in power. There is no, I do want to say, there is no quote unquote moral, this is right and this is wrong. No, what it is what the majority of the people agree to, right? Like, for example, if you live in an HOA that says, you live in an HOA that says you can't park on the street. Parking on the street itself is not morally right or wrong, but if the HOA says you're not allowed to and you agreed to it, then it's something that you shouldn't do. But it's not. So I want to say that there is no morally correct, right or wrong on how the citizenship should work. The reality is this is however the government chooses to do it. Like it's I think T-Style says it's the 14th Amendment. That's the whole thing. You can that's why it's an amendment. It's a change. It's something that they added or took away. So I do want to kind of, before I answer that question, Maka, I say, this is not a question of what is morally right or wrong. This is how functionally it should work. For me, it's about prioritization. You can't do everything at once. So for me, I would say, you know what? I'm not too worried about a little kid who just got born here. What I'm worried about is, are you over here killing people? Bringing in fentanyl? Are you robbing? Are you breaking? I'm more concerned with that. And if we were to get out all the criminal illegals, and then we say, hey, dude, we have a big problem with people going around vandalizing and burning stuff who are citizens, I would say, you know what? That's more important to me right now.
Yeah.
Right? It's a matter of priority. And I could go either way. I don't really have a preference for the birthright citizenship or not. I just pulled it up here, and it just discusses about what you were saying, just solely, right? The right of soil, just because being born here, right?
That little thing I was watching, it wasn't talking about this in particular per se, but it was talking about how it even came about because it had something to do with like, remember the slaves when they're freed, it was like. After the Civil War, 40 acres and a mule. Then something happened where something changed, all kind of like with the Federal Reserve. Something had to be regulated or something had to be put into the works to kind of like organize it or whatever a little more. And then this came about. But it was just like a lot more behind what these words are saying. But
yeah, I mean, and to me, it really doesn't matter what the decision is as long as everybody agrees to it. What I'm not a fan of is if the majority of the people say we disagree with it and the government just does it consistently over long periods of time, I would say that's a problem, right? Like if America votes, we want to just continue doing that, so be it, right? But I will say this, right now, America overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump says, I'm representing the people, he might do it. And then if people disagree, go vote for someone who will turn that around. Vote for a senator, vote for a congressman, vote for a president that will change that for you. Any thoughts, Masi?
Yeah, no, two things like what Maka was breaking down with the ones who have done, criminal activity while being in the country illegally, and then just the ones who are just here illegally. I do know there's some trickle effects because I'm kind of like with Maka, the criminal ones, they're the first priority. But then they've actually done some studies, and it just depends which hat you're wearing. See, now that Maka's a green resident, Dua, you're a citizen, I'm a citizen, right? See, but this is they say this, and I've seen it here in New Zealand, when you allow a mass migration, they're here and they just say they overstay. But the people who just get by with the bread line, just with the work, so I'm just thinking economics. You get somebody who's an overstay and just stay here longer, guess what? They're going to work a lot cheaper for that employer than what you are. So you're not going to get that raise that you wanted because the company just say, we can let you go. We'll get somebody who's working even half the money that what you are right now. So then even though they're here illegal, they haven't done any crime. They're just trying to get money to send back home, right? So they're willing, and let's just say their living conditions is a lot worse than yours, so they can handle the rough patch. So there's some trickle effect because once they do that, they're gonna affect your paycheck, what you're not probably getting, what you're just getting by to feed your family. And if you get a bunch of those illegals that are staying
flood the market,
the country, flood the market, you're never gonna get a raise. Two, that also jumps the rate for your kids if they want to say get a rental home or apartment, because they're all going to be taken out. So
more competition.
See, it depends which hat, because there's a lot more competition. So that it's going to affect you, even though they're not doing any illegal activity per se of saying committing crimes and stuff, but they're here illegally. They're going to work cheaper, and that's going to withhold. And that's what they were saying. That's why all the companies. Yes, they're gonna affect you economically, even though they're not doing the crime. So that's what I'm saying. Like, and that's why Trump is actually just saying I think there has been a high amount of illegals here. They're just staying here illegally. That's affecting people's paychecks who work in the manufacturing, and that's the reason why a lot of the manufacturing jobs have left the U.S. so they can get the cheaper labor, somewhere else. But because they can always sell back to the U.S. But those are the little things that it has trickle down effects, because it affects the money, the paycheck you bring home, affects the rent that you or your kids want to get by, because they're all taken up because there's no more left. So they got to build new ones that can cost a lot more, even housing. So there's a lot of trickle down effects, even here in New Zealand, because there's been a problem with people illegal overstaying and stuff. There's not enough hospitals. So then you bring the quality of care down, because you're treating a lot more people who are here, let's just say, not paying their fair share of their taxes, kind of thing. So there's a lot of trickle down. There's a lot of trickle down effects if it's not doing the crime necessary to your home, but the quality of life and the quality that you want to do for your future generation, that can take effect. So that's
basically what you're saying. One way or another, it's going to affect.
Yes. Yes. And then, like Masi was saying, it's a priority, right? If you're going to come in and be a criminal and steal right off the bat, you go to the top of the priority, right?
Gotcha.
Granted, I agree. Everyone broke the law, but the one who does it the most, you're going to get the attention first, right? And there's a couple things that I think that is important to really consider. I mean, here's the funny thing, Maka. While you were over here as an overstayer, I didn't realize this, Masi, until much later in my life, but you and I were overstayers in Tonga.
I'm not surprised.
Because we were born in the U.S., we moved to Tonga, and we didn't get. I didn't get my citizenship until like the year I left Tonga.
Yeah.
How many years was that? How many years?
I was 15 years old.
Oh, dang. So 15 years overstay.
15 years overstay, because you're only supposed to have like 30 days.
Yeah.
Right. And then you either get a long-term visa or you become a citizen. Right. Now, granted, it was easy because I literally just walked into the government, showed my dad's birth certificate and passport, and they issued me my birth certificate immediately.
Yeah.
And I became a Tongan. Now, it was easy. But here's the other thing to me, to help people from my perspective to understand it clearly, and we'll watch a video of this. Is why to think of government, you got to think of it as everything, right? Let's use the gang example. How from a gang perspective, how open would they to be anyone to just walk in, get involved in their gang activities, get involved in their drug? They're not going to just let whoever and whatever come in. They're going to say, no, you have to show that you're dedicated. You have to show that you're willing to be part of the quote unquote team, right? These are very logical ways to think. Same thing in a home. I'm not going to let whoever to come into my home and fight Teriha, right?
No.
I may be a little more lenient to family, right? But if the family comes in and they start beating people up in the home, right? They start stealing. I'm just like, Shana, you're going to have to go be successful somewhere else. Now, if they came in and they're overstaying, they're welcome, but they're being nice, right? They're still going to cost money to me, right? Because I still got to buy them food. I still got to do the thing. But you're a little more tolerant when it's like, hey, Tua, at least thank you.
Yeah.
I know I'm a burden, but malo, malo. I'm willing to be a little bit more patient. But when I see you running down the streets of America, burning the American flag, burning Elon Musk's cars and stuff, and causing a nuisance, I'm like, yeah, I think you need to get out of here, right? You know, and let's look at some of the comments real quick before we get too far. Hey, Blue Tuhuli, welcome to the show. He says small government and even smaller taxes. That's how you vote. And that's kind of interesting. There's a video later on, Blue, that we're going to look at from the PBD podcast that kind of talks about that. And we'll get into it. This is a funny one. Masi, why don't you read out Water Bear's comment here?
All right. The girl who broke my heart was an overstayer. Hurt me pretty bad. Then I heard she got departed, and it made me feel better. Is that harsh? Deported, eh? Okay.
Hey, Water Bears, I want to know, is that a cow, or what kind of cow you got over there? Is that tofu? That's or it's just a Fiji blend.
I know who you cover with now.
Here's another one from Water Bears. He says, illegal is illegal. Crossing illegally is a federal crime. Come in the right way. Wait in line. It ain't fair for those who are waiting in line and doing it the right way. I don't have any issues with that comment. Any thoughts on Water Bears?
I say, to be honest, since we're not even on the radar, we're 0%. Just give the polys a pass. Hey, we're 0% of the population. Yeah. We don't affect nothing. Marie. Everyone else, worry about it. I'm not gonna say who, but
yeah, well, see, and that's what I can't argue with that. Maka, that's pretty funny. You know, if we're talking about impact. But but here's the thing that I also think is interesting with what Wada Bears is saying is, if you aren't willing to commit to the rules, you ain't gonna follow the rules usually, right? And I think Americans in general think like what your comment was, right? A lot of Americans are like, like the dreamers.
Yeah.
A lot of Americans are usually okay with that,
Mm.
right? Like, hey, let the dreamers in. They were little kids. They don't know what's going on, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's gonna be fine. Now, but if you're a dreamer who's burning flags,
Yeah.
and you're doing that stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, wait, go dream somewhere else. In my opinion.
Here's another thing. I think that's thanks for that comment. Well, here's another thing that I think is important to bring up is, and again, I'm not talking about anyone specifically. I'm not talking about myself or anybody. I'm just saying, just from my own experience, there are those overstays, illegally cross the border, whatever you want to call them, who are actually actively, because your kids, if you have some kind of citizenship within your family, like immediate family, like a kid or your wife or husband or whatever, like it's easier for them to file, like they can file for you. But you do have some illegals who overstayers or whatever who aren't active in trying to get going to downtown, getting to me, trying to actively get their paperwork. They're just sitting there, they're fine where they're at, they're complacent. I mean, they're comfortable where they're at or whatever. You know what I mean? So you do have those two types of illegals or whatever you want to call them. Those who are actively trying to be, because you have to go through the process. I don't know if you guys know, you have to get your green card and you have to wait for 3 years, then file for your citizenship. You can't just like get your green card and then citizenship the next year. You know what I mean? So there's people actively trying to do that, but then you have some who are, like I said, they're just comfortable where they're at. They ain't deporting me. I'm following the law. I'm cool.
Yeah.
And
I think, like you said, Maka, it does take a lot of time and also finance.
Investment.
You got to pay for all of it. Yes.
We spend a lot of money, man.
Yeah.
But
so it's not easy. Huh?
We knew
the lawyers like it.
The lawyers are best friends. They'll show up at your front door in the morning with a muffin, like, "Hey, let's go. You guys ready?"
If it was up to the lawyers, they'll make it 7 years with your green card and multiple applications in between.
The longer the better.
Here's a funny one from Tevita Tong. How about the homeowners taking the low bid and the illegal contractor?
That's the economics one.
Hey man, that sound like a personal experience right there, man.
No, I have some Tongan guys too, right? Like they do some contracting work and cement pouring and stuff, and they're like, I hear some of them say, man, some of these Chinese ones are going way lower than their bid. And they're saying, I don't know if they're here in the country. Like, see, those are the economic stuff because, like I said, you're gonna get people, let's just say, who are not came the right way or they're let's just say illegal status. They're gonna work way cheaper than you, and that affects the money you can bring home. But that's happening here in New Zealand with some of the Tongan guys who are trying to bid for some work. The Chinese are outbidding them, going lower.
Man,
yeah, no, and that's a good point. I mean, it has an impact. I have another video I wanted us to react to, and this because I kind of agree with you, Masi. I got scolded, attacked, demeaned, whatever you want to say, because said I didn't care about family. I was a terrible person because I took the position you took. Right? These are people I love to death. Right? But I also said, and I say, if I was in their shoes, I would probably do the same thing, right? Like, if I was just a Tongan in Tonga, and an opportunity came to come to America on a visa, and I came to Kumihagmo'ui, I probably would take it, right? Like, I'll be honest, that's probably what I would do. However, I also know what I'm playing with. If you're playing with fire, sometimes you get burned. And I have certain family members that are here or were, this was like maybe 10, 15 years ago, were illegal, and I love them to death. And if I was the one making the decision, I would do the decision you made, right, Maka? Make an exception, right? These are good people. I would make an exception for them. But guess what? That's because I know them personally and I interact with them. It's a very biased position. I think so maybe it wasn't 10 years. It was when Trump was in office last time, right? Not this time, but the last time. And I was like, you know what? if Trump deports the illegals and it happens to include these family members of mine, I'll be sad and I'll be disappointed, right? Because it sucks. But at the same time, it is the law, right? It is what it is. I mean, are you going to say that God, therefore, was unfair when he told Adam and Eve, because you made this choice, I'm God, I can do all things. I'm a person who believes God can do all things. I'm not a person who believes that God is limited. I look at how Heavenly Father behaves, and he's like, you know what? Adam and Eve made a choice. We gotta live through some consequences. Now, granted, we're all human beings, right? When I'm the one who's breaking the law, and I always want some leniency, but at the end of the day, you're subject to the law. And I was kind of like put down a little bit because I was like, you know what? I love them, but also I don't blame America if America removes them for that exact reason.
So you're saying you were hating on because you said it or because it happened and you were like, oh, hey.
No, because I said it. I said if they got deported,
okay.
because they're saying, so you're saying it would be okay if these people were deported. And I said, I'm not okay with it as a person individually because I love them. I'm okay with it from a systematic and a justice perspective. I can understand why it is okay for the federal government to remove them from the United States. Do I like that decision? Am I the one saying yes, yes, yes? I'm like, no, in this specific case, I'm not for it because there's someone that's close to me. Now, if it's someone I didn't know and I was like, yeah, they're probably breaking the laws. I would have been like, yeah, they probably got to go. And we'll show an example of who I would have been like, yeah, this is somebody that definitely got to go. But any thoughts on that before we go to the video?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, too, I'm the same with you, right? It's one of those decisions that, and that's the one. If your argument can cover everybody, right? And then it's almost like saying what's good for you, but it's not good for me kind of thing, right? With the people you know. It's a very tough choice. And like I said, I'm going to help them. Like you said, I'm going to help them I don't know how many Tongans that came on visitor visa that I helped them get some work that's going to pay them in cash. I'm going to help you, but I'm just saying, even if you're my family or not, you get caught, you should know you get caught, you get deported. It is what it is. I'll see you in Tonga when I come, but it is what it is. I'm just saying, right? And that's the thing. That's the argument, because I know it's easy for us to say somebody who we don't know intimately as personal like we do with other people. But if they can go, you've got to be prepared for yourself. And let's just say some of your family member, they get caught. It is what it is. You've done your part to try to give them a platform to try to do better for them, and hopefully they did. But sometimes you get caught in the wrong time at the wrong place, or not even that. Sometimes it's not their fault, but because they associated with other people who are probably not so good, and they get caught.
Called on them. Yeah,
called on them, and that's unfortunate. But I'm kind of like you, Tua. It is what it is, kind of thing. But yeah, that's just my thoughts there.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to this video right here. And to me, I think this gentleman here kind of is sharing. So this is one of the guys who went to El Salvador.
Okay.
Right? Like this is one of the homeboys who went there. Oh, I didn't turn on the sound.
Is it possible to get a tattoo like this if you're not a gang member?
No, you gotta kill.
You gotta kill to get those tattoos. How do you feel right now?
Gotta recognize that what happened to us is like that Titanic, that we were big and strong gangs, but we got hit with the iceberg.
Are you gonna be here the rest of your life?
Yeah, the rest of my life. We murdered a lot of people, and this is the consequence of what we did one day. Like, try to act strong in the day and cry in the nighttime.
You cry at night?
Yeah, because we know that we're not gonna get out of here. It's a maximum security prison.
What was the gang that you were a part of?
MS-13.
I mean, I mean, to me, I kind of respect this guy for many reasons, right? I mean, I don't agree with the actions that he did, but to me, he seems to be very fair-minded. Now, granted, I don't know, to go kill people. He sounds like he's killed a lot of people, right? And he made a calculation, and he said, dude, I came on the wrong side of the equation, right? I can't complain about it. I have a lot more respect for someone like that, even though I disagree with them, obviously, on the fundamental stuff. But that's a fairly reasonable person. What I struggle with is he goes and kills people, and then he's like, yeah, they're so mean to me. They're not treating me right. They're not. And I'm like, Shanna, how many people did you freaking kill?
Yeah.
And you're complaining that you don't get corn dogs every day or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of mentality that I was thinking of, Masi, like when we were talking about earlier, like, hey, you do certain things, all done certain things, and we've all taken risks, right? And we were like, man, I hope this doesn't work against me, but if it did, I deserve what comes towards me.
And you're saying that's what that would be the priority right there, like.
Well, this guy, right? Yeah, 100%, 100%. This is by far the and I think that's what Donald Trump is saying right now. He's saying that's where we're starting, right? Because I don't know, man. The saddest part about the illegal immigration for me is the amount of children that were sex trafficked across the border. That to me is the absolute, like, that's even worse than this guy, right? Like this guy, he was a grown man. He was probably killing people, selling drugs. That's one thing. I would say even a higher priority. All those people, like, I don't know if you guys have seen the videos, but they have kids that are like,
I've
drugged.
seen some of them.
They're drugged, like they're not even awake. Like, yeah, and it's because they found out that if you have a kid with you, they just process you and let you go. Now, this is the reason why process is so important. There's that one thing. If we just think of, oh, yeah, people trying to come here and find a life, well, that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is all the other people who are smuggling in drugs, children, women, right? Like all that. I'm just like, but when you have a stronger process and a system, you can prevent a lot more of that. Because I'll tell you right now, man, the federal government basically paid for child trafficking. Yeah. They literally, they were funding that. And I don't know how you can say God will not hold us accountable for something. If we didn't act on that, then at some point God will say it's not only the people who did it, but the citizens who allowed that to happen for long periods of time. I think you and me and every American would have been accountable of, you knew that was happening, you saw it with your own eyes, and you were okay with it. But
Interesting. No, I was just thinking too, with this whole like, we're talking about immigration and stuff. I'm just thinking, like, it's so important. Like, you gotta know the people you're coming in, because I'm thinking, like, here I am in New Zealand. Remember, same thing with Hawaii, right? The majority of the population were the native people, right? But what happened? You like certain things because you like more labor. Let's just say you're introduced to a lot of muskets and alcohol. When you have an open border policy, things change in a quick second, because a lot of the wars that happened was maybe I don't know if they weren't thinking, or they just liked having this open door policy kind of thing. Because same thing with Hawaii. What happens when you allow open door policy? You're letting a lot of group of people who think different from you, act different from you, and have a different interest from you. You get those three things, and they become the majority. Like, there can be, the society can be destabilized, and then a lot of changes. So, like, that's what I'm saying. Even if you're a native person, I'm just thinking, like, even if Tonga will be run down like crazy if we had an open door immigration. So if you think, and that's the thing, you got to make your argument sound to every situation. if you're open door in America, but you don't like it from your native country you come, I don't see why is that different. It's either you hate America but you still like to live in America because of the material things, but you don't want it to happen to your native country kind of thing. But see, I'm just thinking your argument is more sound if you can apply it in all aspects of levels, and that's a more sound argument because, like I said, immigration, man, it's a big deal because let's just say if New Zealand had a more like they only accepted 200 people per year or per month or whatever, who knows? Maybe the natives would have still been in charge today. It just shows you how important immigration is. You got to know who's coming into your country.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. That's just me there. But
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Maka?
No, that was no, that's get some good insight right there. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me,
don't be a hypocrite, basically.
Yeah, and to me, I'm one of those of when you come across what appears to be a complex problem, the best way for me to understand it is how can I break it down to a personal level for me, right? And for me is my home. How would I be towards someone who just comes whoever, whenever, however they want into my home? Yeah. I wouldn't allow that. I wouldn't be okay with that, right? And illegal immigration is just at a bigger scale. Is that? And so to me, if I were an outsider to something and I snuck in, I shouldn't be crying foul if they kick me out. I'd be bummed about it, but they have that right to do so. But trust me, I'm going to try my best to get an opportunity in there, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've snuck into some kind of either a hotel or something that had a really nice pool or whatever, right? Yeah. Because I wanted to enjoy those things. Of course, we're all human beings. But for me to go in there and then cry foul when they kick me out, that's where I'm saying it doesn't make sense to me. Right. Yeah. And have you guys, was it the Prince Edward Island where that's the really rich place in Massachusetts where Obama and all these guys live. They're all pro illegal immigration until the illegal immigrants were brought to their neighborhood. Then all of a sudden they said, we can't have this. That's the hypocrisy that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Granted, I would have respect for them if they said, okay, come and live in my house. Would I think that was a smart decision? No, I don't think that would be a smart decision for them. But I would at least say, you know what? You at least live what you believe. That I will give you.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the problem is a lot of these people who are pushing a lot of this stuff, they don't even really believe it themselves and they don't show it with their actions. But they're like, you know what? Have them all come in, but let them go over there. Don't bring them over here. Right? Because I've seen these interviews of people who are pro illegal immigration walking, and then a guy will pretend, hey, we have a bus through of illegal immigrants. Can you take 2 people into your home? None of them say yes. And they're at a rally saying, let all the immigrants in.
Yeah.
Right? Like we were saying earlier, I disagree with that MS-13 guy.
Yeah.
I can at least say, you know what? I can at least respect him as a man. He's like, you know what? I gotta suck it up because this is what I chose.
Yeah.
You know, I can at least respect you. Same thing with someone who says, I believe in illegal immigration. I will take the illegal immigrants into my house. I was like, well, I don't think that's a smart decision, but
if you're gonna do that,
Now, if you're my cousin, of course I'm gonna take you in because that's different. You might be here illegally, but I don't feel that you're a harm or immediate danger to my family because we're family.
Blood
now, exactly. But if the immigration, if ICE comes, I'm not gonna pull out any guns or anything and fight on your behalf. I'm gonna be like, cousin, sorry, man. wasn't me who called on you. Somebody, you
Yeah.
pissed off someone somewhere. They called you and they came and picked you up. And so I told you, don't go hang out with those Noia people because you don't know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
But I'm going to just say, hey, man, I'm sorry, but it's the law. We did our best, but it is what it is.
No, I agree.
Good analogy, yeah.
No, my other thought too, before even if we go something else, I was thinking like you kind of mentioned with the church and its purpose, not right with the whole organization, because I think we all understand that the purpose of government, like country government, national security, federal roads and those things, but they've kind of expanded to a lot of different things. But I was thinking, so what? The church is a bit different, right? When they say that you have to have a prophet, right? So they build everything, and I feel like, right? You call the prophet because that's the mouthpiece of God, but it's from the prophet. That's where everything starts. They're there, right? Let's just say the prophet is where the first building block to this organized, like you said, kind of government. So I don't know. What do you think? What is the purpose then of having an organization of
the church?
Of the church.
Yeah, this is the quickest way to get me kicked out of the church, maybe. But
okay,
so
we really want to hear it now.
I'll vouch for you, but if no one takes me serious, sorry too.
Yeah.
Mussey's gonna be like, I wasn't the one who called the first presidency, but if the general authorities come here and revoke your membership, sorry, Tua, it is what it is, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, because I've as weird as it is, these are some of the things that I've thought through. Like, what is the purpose of the church, right? And because the church, we're all human beings.
Yeah.
The church does certain things that we all don't agree with, right? And we're trying to understand what's the purpose of the church. So the question now becomes, and I'll frame it. This is where the thought process happened for me. The church had a beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything that has a beginning has a
end.
But I feel certain people think that church is going to be there for forever, right? Like the church was always there; it'll always be there. I'm not convinced of that, and I'll explain it by this way.
Wait, I have one question. One question.
One question.
So you're saying, because I'm thinking, most of those people are thinking the church is gonna exist till the second coming of Christ, but you're saying that the church should not exist because there'll be a time period, then the second coming will come, kind of thing. Like, where's the timeline are you thinking? Because I think
don't know exactly.
Okay, because I think most people are thinking the church is gonna exist, the organized church organization is gonna exist until the second coming of Christ. But it just sounds like you're coming off after the church is not gonna exist, then there'll be a time period where kind of, let's just say, there is no organized church leadership that happens, and then the second coming of Christ will come. Is that
well? I don't know if the majority of the church members think that, because when Christ comes, the church will still exist.
Oh, okay.
And there will be an Adam on Diamond. Adam will have what they currently describe as a sacrament meeting with Adam presiding, right? And then Christ will also be there. So maybe I'm thinking wrong, but I think majority of the people think the church is going to be around for forever.
Maybe it's the people I hang around with. Maybe that's
okay. Maybe I mean, we need a survey.
Everybody got their own interpretation, huh?
Exactly. But so the way I think about it is this way, Masi. You have Heavenly Father and Adam and Eve, and they talk to Heavenly Father directly. To me, that's the ultimate goal. Not have anyone between you and your Father, right? That's the ideal. That's how I feel about, because we're in a fallen world. The ideal would be the only government is family. You don't need an intermediary between you and family, right? It's just you, your family talking with other family of yours. That to me is the quote unquote government. The church becomes a necessary tool because we're in a fallen world and we got separated from God the Father. And so I see the church as a tool, not an end. And I see it somewhat similar to the law of Moses. The people in the Book of Mormon, they followed the law of Moses, but they all knew that one day what? Law of Moses is going to end.
Yeah. There'll be a
The
new
government, the structure of the law of Moses. And that's how I see it. We have a prophet today because we're fallen and we're separated from Heavenly Father and Jesus. And therefore, Jesus formed the church because he was leaving. And the church was the tool by which we were going to continue to interact with the Holy Ghost to have access to the Savior. But we're trying to have access to the Savior because ultimately we want access to Heavenly Father. And so for me, one day, I could be wrong, my current thought process is the church is not going to be there. And I think that's why the church has really pushed this new narrative of family-led, church-supported. Have you noticed? It switched because everybody was saying, the church is going to teach my children. The church is going to give me faith. And I've noticed that there's a pretty big shift in the church where the church is like, no, it starts in the family. That's where it needs to start. The church is here to support you. Right? But everybody, the church was getting so big and it was getting so many programs. Everybody was like, see, I don't have to teach my kids. Just send them off to Sunday school, send them off to mutual. And I think the prophet is being guided by God to say, Ikai, the church is a tool, not the end. And I think that's where a lot of people are, and it leads to a lot of problems as well. This is the same thing with government. When you think federal government or even state government is the solution to your problems, you'll never be satisfied. It's the same thing with the church. If you 100% distribute that responsibility to the church, even if the church is true, you will never be happy. And the reason why is the church is always going to make mistakes. But if you have to take that ownership within your family, right? And that's why the fundamental unit, and this is actually a really interesting thing. The big difference between a lot of political thinking is because, is it the individual that is the center of society or is it the family? I found it that on the liberal side of thinking,
it's the individual.
It's what I want, what I feel, right? Rather than saying, no, it's what's best for my family. Because when you're thinking of the family, that familial relationship promotes unselfish behaviors where you're willing to sacrifice for the greater good of someone else in your family, right? But when it's the individual, when you're just thinking about you, that's a pretty selfish way of thinking, and it doesn't lead to success. And that's where a lot of problems happen. When you're just thinking about what are my rights, what is owed to me, things don't work out too great. And so the fundamental unit of society is not the individual, it's the family. And that's how Heavenly Father intended it to be. That's why he created Adam and Eve and created a family. I think people in the church are making that same mistake, right? They get disenchanted with the church because they're thinking of the church is supposed to give me everything to me and I need everything from the church. And the church is like, no, you got it backwards. Go to your family, apply the gospel principles in your family, lead with your family, right? Get your revelation as an individual within the family, and the church is just providing you the tools to develop that. I don't know if that answers your question, Masi, or
yeah. Well, I have two. Now it just came to me two questions. Like what you're saying, like how about people let's just say, because I'm thinking like there's two different. Because see, this is a cultural thing, because I feel like families, right? Are we talking? Because Abraham, I think of Abraham. When he traveled, he didn't just go with him and his wife and kids. He went with his nephew. He went with some other clans.
Yeah, people he converted along the way.
Yeah, converted along the way, and that's a more Polynesian way of how they do families today, right? And that's easier to go back, because you can find some good families that, let's just say, because I'm thinking like the families today, which is just like your immediate family. Let's just say, what if their family are just so dysfunctional they can't go back to their families? The only thing they can have is like the church, and maybe that's why they can't have any families, and they rely on the church to build. They look for the church to really help them to build for their families. So that's what I'm thinking. That's probably where they come from. As a Polynesian, I'm thinking when they say go back to your family, I'm like, I say, okay, let's just say mom and dad is dysfunctional or whatever, but I have a strong uncle and their family. I can go back, learn, be supported by them, and kind of build off from there, and then use the tool. But I'm just thinking like, as a typical Western society, when they say, if their immediate family is just dysfunctional, they don't know where to go. Like, where do
Yeah.
they? I don't know. Well, help me. Help. Those are some of the questions they're probably thinking. In that
Okay.
kind of
No,
sense.
I got a thought on that, but Maka, any thoughts? Anything you want to add, or you want me to just jump in?
I'm just thinking of. So I remember when my wife and I got married. And again, this is just like my father-in-law would say. As we get married, before you get married and while you're dating. So while you're dating, and then when you get married, you might have the thought, because you'll see the differences. Like you'll think because your in-laws do something different, you think it's wrong, vice versa. You know what I mean? But I've learned from his experience, he was like, your way is not the right way, your way is not the right way. It's just different. You just have differences, and you just got to learn there is no right way or wrong way. Like, I mean, of course we know wrong from right, but I mean, as far as like the way you do things, right? So I always thought like, and then here was a big difference with me when I got married with my wife, was they were a little more immediate family. Like when they said family, they meant brothers, sisters, mom and dad. When I said family, I meant all the way 10 generations back. That's all my family. You know what I mean? Like, so when I would tell my wife, I would say, oh, my family has something in LA. My family has something like that. And she would always ask, again, I'm not saying she's wrong or right, but just different, right? She would always be like, oh, who, your brother, your first cousin? I'm like, oh, no, it's my cousin. It's my family, though. You know what I mean? That's how I was raised. But so when she said family, I would always, it would be the other way around. It was like, oh, like who, your cousin? I was like, no, my brother and sister. So I'm just, and we just kind of, over the years, we already have the understanding, you know what I mean? So going to what Masi was saying, I think that's a big, because there was word going around for a little bit, especially a few years ago, specifically in the Tongan wards. They were gonna, you know what I mean? They were gonna dissolve them and kind of.
I remember that.
But I think the first presidency or the brethren saw something, and they're keeping the Tongan wards and stuff intact, and that's why we're having so many states blowing up, Tongan states all over the place.
Yeah,
there's something there that they see, and I feel that's what it is not saying my way being the right way, but we're so communal and we're so family oriented. It's like that's the way I feel the gospel is supposed to be anyway. You know what I mean, kind of thing. Because ultimately in the eternal, even though our minds don't understand eternity, but I mean, from our definition of what eternity would be in the eternal scheme of things, is like we're all family in the end, regardless. You know what I mean, kind of thing. But on our smaller scale, we're already practicing that already, kind of thing. You know what I mean? That's those are just thoughts.
No, 100%.
No, the same thing with like, and that's why I just go back with Abraham when he went with all, like
his whole tribe,
extended
the whole
family.
tribe. Yeah.
Yes, and I feel like that's just I agree 100% along with Maka. I think the Polynesians have right with the definition of family. It's not just that little group. It's like your whole. And I feel like when you go to the next life, it's gonna be like that when it's like family. It's like an Abrahamic way of catering your family, because I feel like that's the right way, and that's why I'm saying be interesting. It'll be interesting, like when you say those stuff, because I know more predominantly in the Western culture, they say family is just like like for Parangi, a lot of them don't know their first cousin, second cousin,
Yeah.
even come to their fourth. It's just kind of them and their own thing, which is a lot different.
Yeah.
And by the way, just in case they're viewing, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to get my in-laws or anybody upset, you know what I mean? I'm just saying like
no, that's just we're just having a discussion. Yeah.
Just in the beginning, you know what I mean? Before one of them sees it and be like, man, that's not how my family would. You know, I'm just saying like I'm bringing it up. That's how I saw it when we first got married. But I mean, my point was to get to that whole of how we see family, like in general, especially Tonga, because I'm using Salt Lake as an example, or Utah in general, because we have like 1, 2, 3, 4. Eventually, we're gonna be having 5 states. I heard they're thinking of another state, 5 states.
It's crazy
in one state, Tonga. You know what I mean? Like,
it's crazy, isn't it?
And I feel the reason behind that is because of how family oriented we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So the things that I want to bring up in this discussion is this. When you break down the definition of family to the smallest possible denomination, it's husband and wife. Right? Like that's where family, that's the foundation, right? Like if we use Abraham, it was Abraham and Sarah. Right? Now, when Abraham said, I'm going to follow God, God told me he's going to lead me to a strange land. Yes, there were people that went with him. That was his family. My gut feeling is if they chose to stay behind, like Abraham's father stayed behind. Abraham still would have gone with or without those people, but he would have taken his wife with him. Because to me, that is the fundamental starting point, right? So if we shrink family to its smallest position, it's husband and wife. And so my kind of answer your question earlier, Masi, and build on what Maka was saying is that's where you build from. This is why God says if you want to go doctrinally sound, this is why the husband and wife will become one flesh. Because that's the building block right there, right? Your wife could come from a dysfunctional family. You could come from a dysfunctional family. But when you two come together, there's an opportunity. And what's the opportunity? To build your own way forward. You may find out later that you thought your family was dysfunctional, but then you just realize that's life. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny how we progress in life and like our ideas of what normal and what was not normal, as you progress with your spouse as to the thing, you're just like, oh man, you know what? Maybe my mom and dad didn't do too bad of a job. You know, it could have been 10 times worse. Or it could be the other way around. You may progress and you're like, man, I thought this was great, but maybe it's not so great. You know, I don't know. Anyways, my point is the starting point is the husband and wife. That's the bare minimum of the starting point. That's the opportunity to either break the cycle or continue. If you both think it's a positive cycle, continue it and add to it as you think. So for me, that's where you can start fresh, Masi, right? Where if you don't have a mother or a father or aunt and uncle as a starting point, but when you and your spouse come together, you can consider that your clean slate to try and build something new. Now, I agree 100% that obviously maybe we're all biased. The extended way of living is my preferred way. And I've justified it in a couple ways. I would have, you know how the Western thinking is, oh, I can't wait till my kids get out. I would love to live with my kids, man. I would love to. If I could, I would have a big enough house where if any of my kids wanted to come live with me, I would love for them to live with me. And part of it is because the way we grew up, right, Masi? We had aunts, uncles, cousins. I loved coming home.
Grandparents.
Because grandparents, there was never a time you show up at home and you're by yourself. There's always someone, something going on, and always something to do. Now, I also think of it for this reason as well. The push to be quote unquote independent makes you more reliant or at risk to rely on the government. This Western way of you're measured in success is by how how independent you can be separated from the bigger family. That's how the Western way of thinking is, or at least the American way, right? Like if you're someone that stays with the family, and you
That's a
don't
negative.
break off,
That's a
that's a negative, right?
Yeah.
But think of it from big government. What does big government love? Isolation. The more isolated you can be, the more at risk you are. This is the same thing that big government wants to do with children. They want to isolate children from their parents, because when you isolate them from the parents, then they love big government over the parents. This is also, I think, one of the weaknesses of the Western approach, in my opinion, is when family definition, quote unquote, and everything has pros and cons, right? If family definition is just my little nuclear family, that can be very positive, right? In the situation of my wife and myself, we were always isolated, and it was by choice, right? Because we were always moving. We were never really close to family. That had some pros, right? We were like, we got to figure this out. There ain't nobody besides you and me, you know? It could have gone very bad. It could have gone very good, but there were some pros on that. I also see a lot of pros of being close to family, right? If things go wrong, you always feel that level of, well, I have my brother, my sibling close by, my parents, my cousins. There's definitely a feeling of confidence. And to me, big government doesn't like you relying on family, right? It doesn't even like you relying on your church, which is in a way an extended family. Big government only wants you to rely on them. And why? Because when you rely on government, you're going to vote to keep bigger government, in my opinion. I don't know if that really answers your question, Masi, but I want to dive into a little bit more of what Maka said, but I wanted to give you a chance to give any feedback on that.
Nope, understood. And just a little question. When do you think is it going to be the prophet telling us that the church is not needed anymore before it dissolves, and then, or how do you see that happening, that the church
That's a
has
very
organized?
good question.
How is it going to look like? Like, I'm trying to say, because you're saying if they have its purpose, and then let's just say, who's gonna be the person to say, almost like a Donald Trump, we don't need the Department of Education
Guns
anymore.
from China hit Auckland.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna say with your thoughts, how is that gonna look like with as an organized?
Malo for tuning in. Everybody else who tuned in, all your comments, appreciate it.
Yes, I appreciate it. There were a lot of comments online. I didn't get to all of them. I appreciate it. Appreciate the interaction as always. Be bold, ask the hard questions, and till next time, peace.
Peace.
Malo.